Hey guys, Mark Williams here with Trigger Time Training in Longmont, Colorado. Now today we're going to discuss using tactical slings to make yourself a better shooter and to increase your marksmanship. Before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about the history of where slings came from and where they've evolved to the modern shooter as we know it today. So even before the Revolutionary War, probably back to the 14th century, 15th century, there was a need for soldiers to be able to utilize their weapon systems and transport them from point A to point B. Whether it was in a march, or it was in a formation, or whether it was on a battle line, soldiers needed to access their firearms very quickly. So it was developed to essentially put some type of lanyard or rope or a leather sling, as it's called, onto a weapon from the stock to the muzzle, and they'd actually shoulder carry or shoulder arm their weapon. We still see that today in the modern American military. From day one of boot camp, you're taught how to shoulder your firearm with the 2-point sling and move it from point A to point B, and how to look good while doing so. When we start getting into more combat-oriented focus in more of the military and law enforcement and even competitive shooter realms, we get away from what we call shoulder carry, and we start getting into really unique, really new ways to utilize a sling to better yourself. So back in World War I, arguably speaking, the modern sniper was born. Back when they used to have the trench lines and the hedgerows, there was a need for really good marksmanship to be able to pick off enemy combatants at distances. So the 2-point sling was really evolving even back in the early 1900s to create a much more stable platform to use your firearm. The cool thing is, a sling that was developed back in the 1900s or even in the 2000s as it is now can all be used in the same way with different theories to make yourself much more efficient and more accurate. Now understand, what we're going to be demonstrating today is with a carbine. It's a Mark 18 from Daniels Defense, and it's with a Magpul MS3 Sling. There's multiple different slings on the market today. You can find a 1-point sling, which I will demonstrate and show, a 2-point, a 3-point, and I'm sure there's either other types of slings out there that I don't even know about yet. I'm going to show the different characteristics of how they all work, but I'm going to show you some pros and cons to why you may choose to use one or another in different types of environments, or maybe even as a standard that you choose to do. The theories that I show you with this Mark 18, although it's a short and condensed, it's a 10-inch and just a little bit longer than a 10-inch barrel. You can still use this on a 16-inch gun. You can use it on a 20-inch high-power marksmanship rifle. You could use it on a sub-gun that's a 9mm, or a shotgun if you're hunting. Whatever the case is, it will work really well. Now, if I detach my sling from my weapon system, you can take a quick look, and this is the MS3 by Magpul. They make an MS3 and MS4. VTAC makes one. Larry Vickers makes one. 511. All these different companies make them. At the end of the day, they're really similar. They have some type of connection at the ends, if it's a 2-point, and if it's a 1-point, as you can see here, like the Magpul MS3, I simply attach one end to the other, and then this becomes my single attachment point to my weapon system. This is a 1-point sling, so this will be worn over the body, and the rifle will be connected by that 1-point connection. To take it to a 2-point sling, I detach that from itself. This will connect to somewhere on the back end of the rifle, and this will connect to somewhere on the fore end of the rifle. I can then shoulder the weapon system like you would see in a marching process, and I can also utilize it for really good marksmanship with precision rifles. You've also heard the term 3-point slings. The way modern firearms are being built, specifically like Daniels Defense, Noveske, Smith & Wesson, and then with the kind of the introduction of new aftermarket companies, Seekins and Knight's Armament, and all of these different types of manufacturers, were able to mimic a 3-point sling by utilizing a 2-point sling. Now, a 3-point sling, when I was in the military, was the creme de la creme of a sling for your rifle. Essentially what it would do is it would attach to the buttstock of your rifle here, and then it would also come up the entire length of the rifle and connect up front, very similar to a 2-point sling. But the caveat was, somewhere in the middle of the rifle, it would have a loop that you would put over your whole body. So what we put up here on a 3-point sling, all this material and sling can easily be mitigated and controlled right here. So if I take my rifle and I put the rear of my sling on to my rear plate of my receiver, and then I put the front of the sling on at the beginning of the handguard, as you can see here, this is effectively working as a 3-point as we used to know it almost a decade ago. So I don't want people to crucify me because I'm not showing a 3-point sling. I understand there's a time and place, and some people, especially the OIF service members and vets, will be like, well, the 3-point sling's the only way to go. But I'm here to tell you, in the modern industry, we're getting around that, making them much more efficient. So let's talk about some different characteristics of a 1 and 2 point, since we're not going to discuss a 3-point sling. You have different types of reasons you're going to use a sling. Hunters and precision shooters will use a sling to effectively use their skeletal system to tighten into the sling, or what we call build a platform inside of the sling, to really kind of make a nice tight position to where the gun's stabilized. What we're looking to do with the sling in a marksmanship setting, if you will, is really kind of take out muscular relaxation in our muscle movement and use the sling to increase bone support by using triangles and isosceles angles and different things to tighten up that whole thing to our body. 2-point slings can be used in a standing position, in a kneeling, sitting, and of course a prone position. I can't demonstrate all of those today, but I can at least show you a little bit of the technique. 2-point slings are also becoming popular because they stay really tight to your body, and if you're doing movement like a 3-gunner, or if you're military law enforcement, combat operators, or you're just an infantryman, or whatever the case is, you don't even have to be in the military if you just like tactical shooting. A 2-point weapon system chokes the gun up to your body nice and tight. You have excellent control of the gun. And for law enforcement and military guys and girls, if you get into arresting, or if you have suspects or insurgents that you're looking to take down or potentially wrestle with, having the weapon stay on you and have good retention of the gun becomes very easy to do. So to use this MS3 sling in a 2-point configuration, my Daniels Defense comes pre-installed with this rear plate, which is affixed to a QD cup. So a QD means quick detach. It's just you probably can't see it really well, but it's just a little cup, and you push it in and then it locks into the system. From there, I take the front of the sling and I put it on itself at the same location I showed you earlier, which is at the beginning of the handguard, which is one of the more advisable places to put the actual 2-point connection. And we'll make sure it's actually seated in there properly. So now that that's there, I have a 2-point sling. Now I'm a right-handed shooter. You can use this as a left or right-handed shooter. You would just simply reverse it on the other side of the gun. And how we'll actually don a 2-point sling is to simply take our left arm and we're going to swim through and put it over our neck. So now, as you see me, the sling starts at the middle of the handguard, goes around my back, over my spine, over my shoulder strap, and then it comes down to the receiver plate of the pistol or of the rifle. Other shooters and folks may have a preference to put the end of the QD somewhere up in a Magpul or some type of stock configuration at the furthest away or to the rear position. I tend not to do that, and I'll explain some pros and cons to that in a minute. So from here, I now have a 2-point sling that's affixed to my body. If I'm wearing armor or some type of ballistic plates or ballistic protection, you want to make sure you fit the sling by adjusting it to your body and your width and length and all of those things. But as I'm going slick, as we call it right here, you can see the sling is nice and tight against my body. If I lose control of the rifle, it hangs just to my left side. And if I were to get into a Scrabble match with an occupant, suspect, or insurgent, or just a bad dude, I could easily throw this gun over my back end, which we call dumping the gun. Or I can twist it one time. Notice how much tighter that keeps the gun. It goes under my armpit, and now I can get into a Scrabble match if I need to. The cool thing about a 2-point sling, especially like the Magpul MS3, is back here you can probably see there's a little pull lanyard. Now, a pull lanyard, or some way to adjust your sling really quickly, is super important. Let's talk about some of those reasons. If I'm in a standing position and I'm on a patrol, just in a combat setting in Afghanistan, and I'm carrying my gun and I see a threat, I can take the threat out, and the gun's going to stay relatively easy to access. But what happens if I need to take an extended distance shot at maybe 300 yards? Me standing in this position is not very conducive to making a well-aimed shot. So what I can do is I can simply take this pole lanyard and I can extend the sling all the way out, or where with training I determine is the best place to do what's called a built position. And I'm going to take my arm and wrap it under the sling, and now it's going to go to the forearm. So now I have tension on the sling, the gun's against my body, it's nice and tight, and I can essentially stand in this position and I could pull the trigger if I want to, and the gun's not going to go anywhere. This is what's called a hasty sling position, and it's going to increase the ability for me to make accurate shots at further distances. Now, another cool thing about having a 2-point sling with adjustment is you've probably seen a lot of instructors and a lot of training get into the topic of shooting both strong side and support side, or what we call a transition from left to right. So if I take my gun and I'm shooting on the right side of a barricade, my hand's a barricade, I can now shoot. But what happens if I need to switch sides and go to the left because that's what the environment calls for? Just like before, I can simply take the Magpul lanyard here, pull it forward. That now gives me distance to get access to the gun, and I have multiple options here. I can choose to switch hands, so I take my forearm and I switch with my rear hand. The gun comes up and away from the face, and now I'm in a left-handed position. The gun's still on my body, and if I need to drop it, the gun will drop, and I can go to a Scrabble match or to a resting position. If you're a bigger dude or a bigger gal and that's not going to work for you, or you have a big neck, or you have body armor on, or whatever the case, by pulling that out, I can now effectively dump the rifle, go to the left side, and continue to do the same technique. Now understand, when you do that, you lose the retention of your gun if you were to go down or get into a fight, but the ability to transition is there. 2-point slings are really cool. I've just shown you multiple ways you can utilize a 2-point sling and some pros and cons to it. If you're in the military and you're essentially a conventional dude and you're an infantry guy, a lot of times you don't get a lot of training in this, no matter if you're in the Army, Marine Corps, or one of the other branches. I was never taught in a basic infantry unit about how to transition from strong to support side, so this thought process didn't even come into play until later in my career. With that being said, another reason that a 2-point's good is if you're in a skill set where you may have to do fast roping, or you may be in a CQB, close quarters combat, close quarter battle scenario, or that's your job, a 2-point sling is really going to be your #1 preferred choice. The other reason a 2-point sling is really nice with really good control is if I decide that I need to make a transition from my primary weapon to my secondary, which is generally a pistol, I can be up on target, my gun goes down, but there's still a threat. I can dump the gun, pull my pistol, and effectively go to a transition very quickly. So that's just another reason to why a 2-point sling is really nice. Now let's go to a 1-point sling. 1-point slings in the mid-OIF, so like in the 2002 through 2005 in Afghanistan, were really popular. They were kind of made popular by some big name instructors who were Delta Force and Green Berets and Navy SEALs, and in the industry they became very prolific. What we're seeing is we're starting to see that trend go away to the 2-point that I just showed you. So with the MS3, to configure this in a 1-point, if I take off my front connection point and release it, and I put it onto the sling at an attachment point that Magpul produces, which you can see is right here, I now have a 1-point sling. If I don this, let me adjust it to my body a little bit. If I don this onto my body, it goes over my shoulder and my left arm just as it did for a 2-point, but now the gun's only being held by one single attachment. This can go somewhere right here on the rear receiver, or it can go on the stock. But you can imagine if it goes on the stock, even with the buffer or the stock almost all the way forward, the gun's going to sit almost down by your feet. So we really recommend getting it near that rear receiver plate, which is just above your hand pistol grip. So what are some pros and cons to a one-point sling? Well, let's discuss that as well. Some pros to a one-point sling is it's extremely mobile. I can take this from a right-handed or strong side. I can transition to a weak side. I can take the gun and put it behind my back. I can do tons of things that I would typically need to do if I'm a law enforcement, military guy, or just somebody trying to train for the doomsday, I guess, if they're out there. The problem is, because it's only one point, it's like a pendulum, and your muzzle, which is arguably the most dangerous thing, and now we're having suppressors being introduced into the game. It's extremely hot. This whole area of the gun is now a hazard. So if I transition to my pistol, one of the biggest things most people argue about is, well, now it's going to swing and hit me somewhere that doesn't feel too good, and I would agree with that. If I take the gun because I need to get into a Scrabble match and I dump it over my backside, the chances of it swinging back on the suspect, swinging back on me, or swinging back on a partner, if we're taken down and arrest, is also there. So the retention of a one-point sling isn't the best. The other thing, if you're once again getting into fast roping or doing anything in a CQB environment, when you start getting confined and you're going through a murder hole on a 53 or some type of helo, a lot of times these get snagged on the murder holes, and then the jump master has to push you down, and it kind of sucks. So you usually have to introduce some other type of connection to make sure this stays tight against your body. So there's a lot of cons to a one point, but once again, the mobility feature is really nice. Now I will say, if you're a three gunner in the civilian world, having a one point and be so accessible and mobile with it can be a really good option. So if I take this off, the final thing we'll talk about are just some different types of things to think about when navigating which type of sling you're going to buy. Typically speaking, in the firearms industry, it's no different from watches or TVs or cars. You get what you pay for. Good slings will run anywhere from $40 to $75, and then you have to add in your QD attachments if that's how you choose to run it. If not, you may have to buy some other type of attachment points for the gun for it to actually work. But you want to buy one that's made from really good nylon, generally from a really good company. Once again, I recommend Magpul or VTAC or Vickers. And you want to use the sling and the weapon system in a training setting before you just go out and start using it. One of the biggest things that we see is, like, this Magpul has security locks. So you can't see them in the video, but there's these two little toggles here, and that essentially locks and unlocks in a permanent setting these little fingers to bite into somewhere. I oftentimes see a lot of our students who forget to lock that in, and as they navigate through a course of fire or through a scenario, they drop the gun and it hits the deck, and the gun's hot. That's a huge safety hazard that you really need to try to avoid. So we're looking for bomb-proof materials and bomb-proof equipment that will work really well. So there you guys have it. There's a little bit of discussion about where the sling came from, talking about the 1, 2, and 3 point, specifically the 1 and 2 point. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments box below. You can also email me or find us at our webpage. Once again, I'm Mark Williams with Trigger Time Training. You can find us at www.t3main.com, or you can post comments below and we'll get to them. Thanks and have a great day.